there are days that I wake up that I would literally give anything to go back to being naive. Do you remember the good old days when it's just like you're experiencing like, man, it's just like, oh man, we were having fun. You believe the best in everything until there's the moment when you can't unsee things. You can't unhear things. You can't unexperience things. And you know from that moment forward that nothing will ever be the same again.
Hello, everybody. Mike Donahue here with Brian May, and you are on Groomed.Connect. And we have a special guest today. His name is Michael King, and he is the founder and director, CEO of Teams.Coach. And he is a tier 1 executive coach for leaders in their teams. He's an awesome guy. I've gotten to know him over the last couple of years, and we'll get to him in a second. I just have to clear the air, Brian. We made a big deal out of the Patriots last week, and just to be fair, we got to take our losses. I am wearing a Patriots shirt because I want to show the world that I'm still a fan, even though we got annihilated in the Super Bowl. We will be back, Brian. We will be back. Got the hat too, all that. So
yes, sir. And shout out to Steve Hayes.
Well, I wasn't going to go that far.
But just say about that.
Yeah, that was a good game. It was, they shouldn't even have been there. I mean, they exceeded all expectations. So the fact that they were there in the Super Bowl, I was pretty happy about it. So,
well, and people don't realize you and I have been all things Boston fans all of our lives, and there's been some lean years in there.
Oh,
so,
yeah. I followed Steve Grogan.
I was just gonna say, does the name Steve Grogan mean anything to anyone?
Yeah, Russ Francis. I mean, we go back with we were the Jets. I mean, we sucked. We were horrible.
Big time.
Yeah. No, I've been a fan ever since. So. All right. Well, hey, Michael, let's get started. Michael's also he's a recording artist. He's an author and a recording artist, and he's going to talk about his new project. I don't want to say album, because is it an album?
It will eventually be an album, but we're currently doing just kind of like monthly microfilm drops. So every month we kind of release a micro keynote experience with a music video concept and a leadership guide. And they're doing really great so far. So it's been really fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, I want you to get into that some more. But anyways, go ahead, Michael, and introduce yourself, and who you are, what you are, and why we're connected.
I have no idea why we're connected. Like somewhere the universe just said, hey, let's go ahead and get a bunch of crazy people together and let's see what happens. But you and I actually worked together for a little bit, but my experience and my journey went from, being, a musician and a recording artist, worship leader in the church. I eventually became, in this order. So worship leader, recording artist. Then I became an executive pastor and also a worship leader and worship pastor. And then through a series of traumatic events and really horrible choices on my part, I became a car salesman for a moment and killed it. Did really, really well, and then became a finance manager and kept pursuing the dream. Finished out school and got two different master's degrees in leadership and organizational coaching and executive coaching, and ended up about 2017, 2018, launched one of my 3 companies that I now own. And next thing you know, I'm coaching anywhere from Fortune 500 to Fortune 100 leaders, helping them break world records because, just like Olympic athletes, when they want to break world records, what do? They hire a coach. And so that's what the world's best leaders do with me. And I love it. And now I get to incorporate in my creative brand that I finally got over myself. I finally got over all the fear factor because I kind of felt like after I left the church that I wasn't able to bring the music side with me, having all this experience with music. And so now we incorporate some really meaningful storytelling and songwriting in with our coaching and keynote experiences. And it's transformational. I feel like I'm making a bigger difference in the world now than I ever have. And And so, yeah, so that's what I get to do now. Now, the reason why we get to work together is because why I'm here is we've the movement that I came from of being an executive pastor happened to come from the Assemblies of God. And so I went to Assembly of God Bible College and kind of came through those ranks. And so we have quite a few mutual contacts. Just like everybody, I think in the AGA, it's like we might be related. I don't know, but we don't want to pull like
weird
an
family.
ancestry.com thing and see if we have the same father or something.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because there is a lot of movement going on in the Assemblies of God with exposure to bad leadership. I mean, we can go into all the details of the sexual abuse and spiritual abuse and things like that, but really, what it comes down to is really unchecked leadership, and that's your thing. I mean, you're really into integrity and helping leaders follow through with those kind of things. But what's your like, because you've been in it and now you're out of it, kind of like us. What's your take on all that without being detailed about it with different people, but just looking at it from a macro point of view? What's your take on all this exposure to these things that are happening with people being exposed for different things?
I think eventually it's, I guess cream rises to the top, and the good or the bad, right? Eventually, the Bible does tell us that that your sins will be exposed, and shouted from the mountaintops, right? So, I think it's over a period of time, um, and I have a different perspective on it because I was somebody to where I lost myself in leadership. I made some horrible decisions along the way that I'm not proud of at all. And so for me, like I still love Jesus and I still go to church and I still support church leaders, but I've become incredibly cautious of abusive and psychologically manipulative systems that only serve themselves. And what you find, I think, within this is that I even came up with this term. I haven't heard anybody else use it, but if you are a creative within the church, you find yourself in these transactional relationships, and I call it talent trafficking. You are good for the house, and you're good for somebody else's vision until you're no longer good for the house, and you're no longer good for the vision. And and that was my experience, was that, like, in the middle of it, well, first of all, if you're a leader and you're watching this and you're within the church, the warning signs really quick that you just have to kind of own it yourself is that sometimes, I didn't grow up with a great family background necessarily. Like, it was a broken home context, and and I felt really insecure. I felt out of place like the majority of the time when I was in high school. And I started dating the children's pastor's daughter at the local Assembly of God church. And so it was kind of a missionary dating situation, right? Um, Anybody relate to that, right? But I was already a very high ranked saxophonist. I was very successful even going into my, sophomore and junior year of high school. Um, and so it was one of those things where I was pulled into what I considered like was a pretty cool church environment, with the agreement of like saying, hey, listen, if you play on the worship team on Sunday nights, you can date our daughter. It starts off small, you know,
Ah,
starts, starts off small, but you find that community and you find value and you find acceptance. And then the next thing you know, it's just this series of events that takes place over a long period of time, to where now all of a sudden I've been in it for close to a couple decades. I'm leading. I'm the executive pastor in one of America's fastest growing churches. I don't have necessarily a personal friendship with the person that I was his number two. It was a highly transactional relationship. So I felt incredibly alone in it. And now all of a sudden, and also high levels of emotional, psychological, and spiritual manipulation happening all within the context of what I was experiencing. And I can't talk about it because my financial systems, my friend systems, my spiritual systems, my socio-economic, like everything about my identity was wrapped up in this one thing. And I didn't know what to do. And I literally, and that's when that's when my short circuiting started to happen, to where I was just like, you know what? I don't really even have a reason to live anymore. So I'm going to make some really, really horrible decisions, and I'm going to go ahead and self-destruct. And that was the environment, that kind of thing. Now, on the other side, and the thing where it's like, I hope we get to the aftermath of the stories, because I think there are a lot of people that go through situations in which they lose themselves and they make decisions. And I'm not going to say mistakes. I made decisions that, that, that I'll be, for the rest of my life, I'll look back and say, yeah, those were decisions that weren't great. But the the thing is that, like, on the backside of it, as far as like the process that I went through, wasn't great, and that was probably even more damaging than the circumstances I was in the first place.
What do you mean by that?
Um, well, real quick before we go into that, that's a really great question. But because of the aftermath, though, is like, how do you put it back together as a leader when you feel like you're in that situation to where you lose everything because of your decisions that you make. And I want to be really, really clear that these were decisions that I made. I'm 100% responsible for the decisions that I made. And it's still a constant thing to where I have to work on myself. But how do you pull it back together? How do you get back up? Because there are a lot of people that came through grooming environments, thus this podcast, to where they're on the other side of it. And they might not even necessarily even know, as they're listening to this, they might not even necessarily know that that they're in that environment. And
Right.
they need to know, like, hey, listen, there is life on the other side of it. And what are things that you need to do to be able to pull your boots back up, and to be able to get vision, to be able to get hope, to be able to see what the future could be, what type of impact you can have as a leader. And for this to not be your identity, because these seasons, these are temporary. Like, God has a bigger plan for your life. And even though, like, these systems are corrupt and they are wrong, this is not like, you have a greater purpose on your life. Don't allow this to identify you.
I think that's really important, and I think what triggers me when you say that is that you really do believe when you make, because I was in that same spot where I made some bad decisions after I went through a divorce, and the same time the church world was abandoning me in my estimation. Um, I did make some bad decisions, and your ang your systems of recovery are back there too. So, that was tough for me because I had no, I couldn't go back to the church, it felt like, because they had a script for me and I wasn't going by the script. And so that gets hard because
Mhm.
I had to dig different wells of mental health for me, and maybe you can talk to that a little bit, like, what's that process like?
And I think, I think when you're dealing with leader failure within the church, I mean, it's like there's no win in it, So I have empathy for people that are on both sides of the conversation. I have I have empathy for people that are actually experiencing failure, um, and because it's not like, like, you can put labels on it as much as you can, but I think especially like in the church, when somebody puts the term of like moral failure on somebody, it feels like a death sentence, like, if you're in that singular moment,
Yeah.
um, and but it's so much bigger than that. It's identity failure, it's internal system failure, it's psychological failure, it's emotional failure, it's soul failure. And so it's just not that simple. And so you have to kind of go through the process of making sure it's like, so when and at the end of the day, so if you are a lead pastor and you're working with somebody who's going through failure, the first thing you have to recognize is that the person that's sitting at the other side of the table, they're still a child of God, and they have a heartbeat, they have a soul, and you have to understand, somehow they got to where they got, and you are a part of that story, whether you want to admit it or not.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Right.
Right. And so that's where the empathetic thing happened, And so for me, like, when you like, I'm laughing now, but it wasn't funny, and I'm not mad at anybody. Like, I have no grievances, etc. Like, I want the system to change. And that's why it's like when you reached out to me, I was like, man, I want to be super careful because I want the best for everybody. I want God's redeeming work to continue to be done, and redemption is not just on my side of the fence. And that's the thing, is that I'm still imperfect. I'm still working through things, but like the thing is that I am more aware of who I really am today. And I'm more honest about who I am today than I ever have been before. And so I love the life that I get to lead now. But going back into those moments, they were incredibly hard. Um, and so like, I'll kind of give you kind of a breakdown of the story of what my experience was towards the end, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think you'll start to see a little bit of this. And I want to be transparent that this is what it was experiencing on my side of the fence. Um, and so it was like I'd made some really, really, some pretty huge catastrophic failure decisions, and nobody knew about it. I kept it close to me, and, um, and some things had started to leak. And so we were starting to have some conversations, with the church board and leadership, etc. But it all happened around Christmas time, right? And nobody knew that I was going to resign except for me. Like, nobody knew. And so I'm getting ready to go into multiple Christmas Eve services at the end of the year. Got my guitar strapped onto my back, and I'm getting ready to walk up to the stage, and I finally give my final Hail Mary prayer to God, and I say, you know what, man, God, if you can show me how I'm going to take care of my family tomorrow, I will walk into this place and quit. I will tap out. Now, the thing is that, what I was thankful for, was in the middle of these conversations, was that there was a conversation about, kind of taking through a restoration process. I'm sure that there was an opportunity for me to be able to keep my job. I wasn't necessarily fired. They gave me the opportunity to resign, all that stuff, right? But if you stay, you have to go through a very, very specific process. And there was something within me that was like, I wanted to go through a process so I could become a better version of myself. I wanted to find healing. I wanted to protect my family. And I just didn't feel like I could become the version of myself that I could be proud of if I stayed.
Yeah.
And because the thing that got me to that moment, the consistent behind the scenes humiliation, indoctrination, shame culture, spiritual and psychological, emotional, and even verbal abuse that happened on a consistent basis, in which it happened in front of other people. And that was really frustrating for me as a young leader at the time, because like, I have elders around me that literally are seeing these types of things play out all the time, and they just kind of let it happen. They would come to me behind closed doors and say, hey man, I don't know why you allow that to happen. You need to say something. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah.
I'm the one who's getting the crap kicked out of me here on a day-to-day basis, but like, nobody else is raising a yellow flag.
That's right. Who's got my back?
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm here. And so anyway, so I said this prayer, right? I get up on the stage, and I mean, it's packed out. Like, at this point in time, it's like the pinnacle of the growth cycle of the church, Christmas Eve. And so I go out to the lobby, and there's this former Cornhusker football player, that I had mentored when we did this thing called Campus Church down at the University of Nebraska. And he comes up to me, and he was like, hey, almost like a father coming, like a son coming back to a father. He's like, hey man, I just want to let you know I'm home visiting people for Christmas, and I came here to talk to you. I was like, oh man, that's awesome, dude. So good. He was like, I got my life put back together. I just want to let you know, man. And I wanted to show you my paycheck. This is how much I'm making. And so he goes and he pulls his paycheck out of his back pocket, right? And he was like, this is what and he was like making good money. He was like, I think he was making like 20 to 30 grand a month as a finance director for an auto dealership. And then he says to me, he goes, yeah, if you know of anybody that's looking for a job, I'll hire them tomorrow. I was like, you mother effer. I was like, are you serious, God? This is the thing. Like, I give you this prayer literally 15 minutes ago and say, just show me how I'm going to take care of my family. And you send me to a car dealership. Are you kidding me? So December 26th, before the crap hit the fan, I went to my first job interview as an adult man that I've ever had, because people have just recruited me since I got out of Bible college. So
Right.
I went here, there, etc. And so I went. At first, they told me they weren't going to hire me because they felt like that I loved people too much. That's what the car dealership said. But took the job. Within 3 months, I became car salesman of the month, and then I got promoted to being a finance director, manager. Finished out my master's degrees. I was still coaching some churches and other organizations behind the scenes, and I was kind of going through a restoration process with some friends. Which restoration process? That's an interesting conversation. Would love to talk about that. But at the very beginning of January, so after these things happened, I was in my head. What I was processing was, I just simply want God to give me favor. I want God to bless this season. I want to be humble. I want to own this. And by me trying to own it and trying to do the right thing, I wasn't prepared for the unforeseen emotional and psychological implications of what that process was going to do to me. And what that looked like was pretty much public humiliation and shame. I wrote a resignation letter that I felt like that was kind, that didn't implicate anybody, didn't take any shots at anybody. I really owned it and said, hey, listen, I'm going to take this season to really focus on my family, try to get my life back together. Peace out. You know what I mean? And I'm standing on a stage reading this resignation letter in front of several hundred people. I bet you there was 500 to 600 people in the room. And then immediately after that, and there was a lot of other meetings behind closed doors with the board, to where a lot of emotional conversations. I saw Beth, my wife, step up as being almost like a warrior, to where it's like, I've never seen her like actually fight for me before like that.
Good for her.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Sorry. So, but I knew that no matter what, from that moment, like, because again, she's, I'll never be okay with like the decisions that I made, but I think that what was awesome about who she is that she really recognized, um, like she knew who I was. And so she knew my pain. She knew my whole story. And so I think she had a little bit more grace with some of the decisions that I had made. Not because they honored our family or honored her. I just think she understood who I was. And so she showed me a lot more grace. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so I'm standing on the stage in front of hundreds, maybe even 1,000 people, and I'm reading this resignation letter, and then completely unaware of what was going to be said next, my lead pastor comes up to the stage, and he starts doing a teaching on moral failure and how a church can respond. And I'd never heard the term moral failure in this whole in the whole process. Like the first time that I'm hearing it, and then people from the board, they come up and they take me and my wife, and they actually escorted us out of the church, and they wouldn't let us say goodbye. They wouldn't so it was just this massive public humiliation moment. It was a pomp and circumstance of getting escorted out of the church. And then it was silence, like it's been almost 8 years. And I don't want to talk about it with that person. I have no interest in it at all. He hasn't reached out.
You won't.
But that,
You won't.
yeah. And again, I'm not mad about it, because again, it's like
I am, but it's all right.
because I created it, but I was a part of something. I was a part of a system. I was a part of an environment, and and the whole system plays well together. And I think that, again, there's always two sides of the story. But as I was kind of jumping through these hoops, it was like, so the things that I did is I immediately now they wanted to control who I hopped into marriage counseling with. They wanted to control who I saw as my personal counselor, which they recommended. It was like the counselor that they wanted me to meet with. In order for me to get my severance package, was for me to meet with somebody who was actually the best friend of my former boss. And I'm like, you got to understand here, like, trust has, like, the reason why we're here in the first place is because, like, the whole system is untrustable. Like, And there's no way. So now on the aftermath, in order for me to get my severance package and all this stuff, like I have to go through something that's incredibly controlled by the environment that put me there in the first place. I was like, no way, you got to be kidding me. Not going to happen, you know? And so, you know, I reached out to some mentors. I surrounded myself with some good people. And guess what? Like, this doesn't take care of the issues that got me there in the first place. It doesn't. Like, we spent so much time trying to fix the trauma of the exit from ministry and the trauma of how we were treated, that we never actually in that season. So this is 8 years ago. We actually never were able to focus on us.
Right.
It was just simply trying to pick up pieces and survive.
Right.
And so hopped into counseling. So I met with a counselor every year for probably about close to 3 years before I kind of cycled down, but I'm still a huge promoter of working with a therapist, having good pastoral people in your life. But there's all these things. And so now now I'm here. It's really kind of strange how God blesses the experience, you know, now being an executive coach and working with some of the most daring and brave Fortune 500 leaders, Fortune 100 leaders, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, etc. I'm thankful that I get to do what I do. We just started incorporating music back, and that's why I was saying it's an interesting story, because this was such a traumatic experience for me that it would be close to 6 years before I would ever pick up a guitar or sit behind a piano ever again. I just couldn't do it. And so when my creative director came to me last year and they're like, we don't know of any other executive coaches who are also like a professional musician and a recording artist. Like, is there a way that we can put this into like our differentiator play? Because I'm sure that there's something we can do with it. And so I'm super proud of what we've been able to create.
Yeah, I've
So there is,
listened to a couple of the songs and they're really good. They're really good. I want to use one of them in schools because it's not religious, but it's very hope giving,
Right.
and I like it. So we'll
Thanks,
we'll
man.
include the link. We'll put the link to be able to access these songs, however that works out with you, whether they buy them or you. I don't know. Do you give them away or how does that work?
Yeah, it's the films are available on YouTube, and then we're streaming on all the, like the full singles are released through Spotify and Apple Music, wherever you get your streaming music at all. So, and then I'm actually heading to Nashville. So we've got 2 films out so far. One of them is called Through the Haze, and it's just about finding clarity through the noise. And again, relates a little bit to my story. You know, life can feel a lot of gray and incredibly foggy. And this is one of the things that I learned just even in coaching. Again, clarity is your superpower. It's like you can make anything happen as long as there's a clear vision. But then this last one was Unbreakable Things. And this one features my son in the video. So
I
it's
like that.
so cool. But this was kind of the idea of like, and I think even just going back to the things that we talk about, like how many times do we actually start believing the lie that we're broken?
Right. 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 So if I could, I just want to make a couple comments here. First of all, for anybody out there who doesn't know this, Mike Donahue and I are both intimately acquainted with not only the people who are involved in Michael's situation, but we understand the roots of that. We understand we understand the soil that it grew up in. We understand the leadership that begets bad leadership that begets bad leadership. We understand where all that came from. We're part of, watching that grow up in kind of a perverse way. Something that you said. So let me just say that I think one of the things, Michael, that you have said that is really coming through is that it's a very caustic system. It's a system that is not designed for people's success. It's a system that is designed for the system's success. You talk about talent trafficking. When you talked about your exit, I think that was a great example of what we've talked about on the podcast here is that you are good. And you talked about this earlier too. You are good and you are useful and you are worth having around until you're not. And that, that is trafficking 101. how deeply impersonal and dehumanizing that is. So, and I guess the reason I'm saying all this is that it's a very complicated landscape in these kinds of churches, because it's never just that there's a bad person. There are people who are acting poorly, but a lot of times those people are acting poorly because it's just the water they're swimming in. It's all they know. It's all they know to do. They're blind to a lot of what's going on. So sometimes it's malicious, sometimes it's not. But I think the thing that you said most of all here is you appreciated the fact that you came to a point where you were able to find a way out of that, kind of out of the fog, and find a way to ground yourself and to move on with your life. Being able to be authentically who you are, not who you were supposed to be inside of that system, but be authentically who you are. So I hope folks out there who are hearing this, who are in the middle of this kind of situation, and believe me, you don't have to be a pastor on staff. I wasn't a pastor on staff. I was a school teacher for 6 years, but when I quit that job, I stayed in the church. You can just be a Joe, working in the church and experience these same kinds of things. Probably not to the depth. You don't get to see what happens behind the curtain, but if you're out there, I just want to I want to echo Mike's message of hope. There is something on the other side, and it's good.
Yeah, that's powerful too, Brian. And I think in some of these things, when you talk about malicious intent and things like that, that's where it's like, well, I want to be super careful. It's like it's like I think somewhere there's in the thought process, it's hard for me to know that somebody didn't know that something was wrong. And because what ends up happening is that, like, there's so much, like, like some of the jokes that were made about it being like a church of nepotism, because what ends up happening is like leadership kind of surrounds itself with people that are like one or two steps removed from being immediate family, and you build up these constructs of protection. And it's not even necessarily like, so for me as a leader, I believe in building by design. It's like, okay, great. What's the vision? Great. Let's go ahead and do that. Now let's build the structure with team members that are qualified, that have high levels of character, that have high levels of competency and high levels of chemistry. And let's build the team in order for them to be able to run in these lanes for you to be able to accomplish the vision of the organization. Right. That was a pretty good little snapshot of a little leadership nugget right there, wasn't it?
Like
that was pretty good.
That'll be a reel.
That was good.
Right? But what ends up happening is, like, in these contexts, it's like, and so for me, being, I was the executive pastor, to where our lead pastor pastored the church, and then I pastored the team. I'm looking at, and I'm like, I have no ability to lead this thing. This thing is complicated because everybody is related some way, or like, one step removed from being direct family. It's like people that have been in his life for the last 30 years, and they helped raise his kids, and so now for some reason they're unqualified, but they're on the team, and there's nothing I can do to help them grow. There's nothing it's because they're there for a completely different purpose. They're a placeholder for protection. And so these environments, they become really, really complicated. And we see this in, like, and it's not just this movement, like we see it all over, but it's the good old boys club. Like, we care more about keeping the machine working than we actually care about protecting people.
Yeah.
And, I think that's where some of the things are starting to unravel right now. And so, I don't know what the future looks like on that.
And I would just suggest that you talked about moral failure. That's moral failure. I mean, if you are running a system that claims to be the extension of Jesus' ministry in the earth, and that's what you've become, I would say, I mean, I don't think Christianity is about morality, but I mean, I'm going to turn the table back on those folks and say, if you want to talk about moral failure, let's talk about that, because ultimately that is a failure to meet the objective of the mission.
Yeah, because it's about people. It's about taking care of people. That system should expose weaknesses in staff members. and then you go to work pastoring them. You go to work restoring them with dignity and respect, not publicly humiliating them because there was a, it was a grievance against the system, it was a grievance against the brand. Because that's what it comes down to. Is like it hurts, when people make mistakes, it tarnishes the brand if you look at it that way, right? Like, okay, we're this image that we've put up as this perfect church and this, we have it all together. We have a staff member who made a mistake. Instead of restoring that staff member and showing the world what that looks like, we push him aside and go, oh no, let's get somebody else in there who looks cleaner, and lo and behold, that person ends up, whatever. But it's like this image management system rather than the restoration system. And churches should be hospitals, not museums. We've heard that a lot, right? But they become museums. They become a place where we're going to show off our best people instead of, this is a hospital. This is where sick people come, including the staff. And so we're going to work things out with them and show the world that we can care. Am I wrong? I'm probably wrong.
You're so wrong. You're just making stuff up now, man. It's horrible.
My chair.
But we've heard those analogies before, about the church should be a place, and I for hospital and restoration and all those different things, and and so that's where I can't necessarily, I don't know, like I chose to opt out. Like that was my thing. I tapped out. I was, like when I woke up on the morning of December 26th, I'm going in for my first job interview, but I didn't know where my next paycheck was going to come from. I didn't know I didn't know anything as far as like how I was going to survive. I knew nothing, but I just knew, you've heard this saying before, is that people won't change until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of making the change.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's where I was at. Like I was literally willing to go down an incredibly reckless financial path, and stability path, because the only thing that I knew, and which, by the way, I felt like, the whispers of the Holy Spirit, and I felt like God was speaking to me the whole time for the most part. But when they talk about the dark valley of the soul, the only thing that I heard God tell me during this season was create a normative experience for my kids. That was my thing every day. Like, protect your kids, create normal. So it's like, so to this day, like that's my thing, is like, I look at my kids and I'm going, you know what? I think I did okay. Like, my kids are freaking rock stars. Their character's great. They love the Lord. They're active, they're creative, they dream bigger, they take big risks. And they think they can accomplish the impossible, which is like, man, I tell you what, like, if that's the only thing that I'm able to put on my resume moving forward, it's like, let's go, let's do that.
I want to say this though, if you don't mind, I think that's awesome, and I'm proud of you for making that step to get out. And you said something at the very beginning of this about how it's difficult for people to get out of that system because it's everything. It's your friendship circles, it's your financial stability, all of that. And you took a huge risk by getting out of that. And I also want to go back to something you said about all of that and say and again, I know you're taking responsibility for your actions, and that's great. And I really do applaud you for that. I'm not saying that to be nice. I'm saying that because I really respect that. But at the same time, that system was creating part of that secrecy in you, right? It was like this tension was there, that you were as part of this system that was pretty dysfunctional. And you said it. You said, I had no one to talk to about it. I had no one to go to. So you made a bad decision. You made a bad choice, whatever. Okay. But I'm not exonerating you from your decisions, but that system is what created that secrecy. And then you made a bad choice. Okay. But then you had to get out. You had no choice to get out because you couldn't get restored in that system. The system created it. So that's what happens to a lot of these pastors that are stuck right now, that are making some bad decisions, whether it's alcohol, gambling, I don't know, whatever. And they're doing things that are secretive because it's meeting this need to get, I don't know, self-medicate, I guess. And they have they can't go to the church. And I think it was a brave thing for you to do. I really do. I think it was incredibly brave thing for you to do.
I would second that. Both of you, I've said this many times on the show about Mike. I mean, I had a job when I left teaching at the church's school. So I stepped out into making peanuts to making decent money. Both of you guys put everything on the line and left. And that is an incredibly inspiring and courageous move. So I would just want to echo what Mike said.
Man, I think, I appreciate that, guys. I seriously do. And if you have any superpowers to exonerate me from my past mistakes, feel free. I'm an open candidate for that. But here's the thing. So you've been in situations. I want to make sure that before I forget about it, I want to talk about excommunication, and I want to talk about square peg round hole. And because I think if and when we talk about the overall experience of this, is that whether we like it or not, I think sometimes we end up preying on the insecure and the people that are highly impressionable within our system. Okay, that is the 18-year-old version of Michael King. Is that I was highly impressionable. I was highly insecure. I didn't really have a family, and so I found safe harbor within that community. I didn't necessarily feel called to ministry when I went to Bible college. I went there because that's where my girlfriend had went, and I was like, well, let's figure that out. So within that, I think that we have to understand the system is that, again, at the entryway of, and I'm using the term grooming because that's the name of your podcast, but it is a grooming-ish experience, right?
Let me just interrupt you there for just a second. There is no question. This is grooming. They create a situation where they bring people in who have legitimate needs, who are looking for the answers to legitimate human conditions. They attach you to themselves. They make you dependent upon them. You mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, your relationships, your financial, everything. There is no doubt in my mind that is grooming 101. So feel free to call it grooming without apology. Sorry to interrupt. Carry on.
No, it's all right. So, it's just one of those things, like, so be careful, like within that, that's where, that's where things get a little bit goofy, is because, again, like the idea that you're valuable until you're no longer valuable anymore.
Right.
You don't see it coming, like, at the time. I promise you this, is that this moment is going to come in which all of a sudden, you could be that youth pastor that's been in that position for just a little bit too long. Maybe you're starting to age out a little bit. I promise you, there is a disposable moment that could be coming up, like if you're in an unhealthy environment. So you just have to be aware, like, make sure your heart's in the right spot, ask the right questions, surround yourself with good advisors and good leaders who are healthy, that can see things from other perspectives, and don't allow yourself to be in that stuck motive for too long, because if you feel like you're stuck, destruction's not too far away. So, like, but own that yourself. Like, don't fall victim to the environment that you're in. Like, own it. The other thing is because, like, so square peg round hole, I hate to say this, but I felt like square peg round hole the whole time that I was in the movement. I've never actually said this publicly before, but here I was an executive pastor in one of the fastest growing AG churches in the country, and I never actually got my AG credential because something felt wrong here. Something didn't make sense to me. Something didn't make sense. I was like, why would I want to be a part of this group of people? Like, the theology feels a little bit wonky. Your personal behaviors and how you behave behind closed doors and how you treat people and what I see you do behind closed doors, and then the indoctrination and some of the isolation and the things that you do, like, I don't want to run to this group of people. I don't feel safe. It doesn't make sense to me. So I figured out kind of like how to, like, I got my credentials through a third party, and I figured out how to kind of exist within the system without being one of the good old boys. Um, and, and then the day happened when like that excommunication card got played.
Yep.
Dude, man, there's nothing like, it is a surreal experience when you go in a single day of feeling like you have thousands of friends to having thousands of enemies.
Yep.
Like
So
that.
sorry, Michael. I'm so sorry.
That sucks.
That never should have happened that way.
And so when we chose to not leave, we, like I told you, like our true north was, we're going to stay, and we're going to focus on our family. We're going to focus on making sure our kids are great. And it was hard because it's like, dude, man, our town's not big. And so it was like one of those things to where it's like, we're going to go to the grocery store. And I kind of felt like I was like hiding behind the grocery cart, like dodging. It felt like I was in like a micro version of my church. I'd go to different Starbucks to see which ones that I was never going to bump into people, because I was so humiliated. But again, that was like, there's, again, I want to be fair. I want to be gracious to it. Like, that's what happens when you go through that process. That process is set in place not because of like just one singular church. That process is looked at as almost a biblical process. Now, there's a difference between biblically accurate and biblically relevant. So you have to understand the context of those things. Biblically accurate, you can do so many things and be biblically accurate. Like, for example, you can do blood offerings and be biblically accurate.
Yeah. You can kill your brother for planting the wrong.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But is it biblically relevant?
Don't get me started, guys.
Are you tracking with what I'm
Calm
saying,
Brian
though?
down.
I'm biting my tongue, Michael. I'm biting my tongue.
So I think again, I think like the overall process, for us, again, it's like, the environments, the I don't really understand some of these folks as far as like what they're doing, as far as the environments that they're trying to create, the secrets that they're keeping behind closed doors, and the cultures that they're creating that are indoctrinated, that are very, very much creating the wrong types of things. But then the process, I think again, it's like, we got to be careful with making sure that when we're taking people through processes, that you're actually not creating more damage than what's already there in the first place.
Well, they're trying to control the results. They're trying to control what, the end game. Yeah. And it's not, that's not going to work.
So interesting story. Coming out the other side, I spent 35 years at Bellevue Christian Center. So we had a lot of relationships. We know a lot of people. We live in Bellevue. Bellevue's not even smaller town than your town. Mike and I had an opportunity. As a matter of fact, one of the pastors there invited us, and frankly forced us to come to his retirement party at Bellevue. And a lot of the folks that are being referred to on this podcast were here. And I was curious as to what that would feel like. Because I can be kind of an a-hole, and I didn't want to go and be an a-hole. Mike can tell you. Mike knows what happens behind closed doors. But we went in there, and it was funny because I was there to celebrate my friend's retirement. And Mike was as well. And a lot of these other people were there. And this is a coming out the other side story. One of the things I realized was that I felt free. Because, for instance, your former boss stood across the room and he caught my eye. And as soon as he caught my eye, he looked away. Because, and the point I want to make here is that there's still something deep down inside these people. They're not 100% evil, right? They're not, they're not just 100% bad, wicked, reprobate, whatever you want to call it in your churchy words. There's something deep down inside these people that understands that when you cause pain in another person's life because of your unjust actions, that there is something there. Not really sure why I said that, other than to say that I don't want to say that you can come out of it being better than that, but you can come out of it without being in bondage to it anymore, and without having that baggage there. You talked about therapy. All those things are very important. But to even step back in, if you would, to the ring and be able to feel clean and whole and free was a pretty awesome experience. And so I guess I'm just testifying it can happen.
Yeah, and I think that for me personally, that day was hard too, because that particular guy you're talking about actually mentored me, and I would consider him almost like a spiritual father at the time. And
Yeah.
I would echo Brian. I don't think there's evil in any of them. I do think though that there's a point where they have to make it. We all of us, not just them. We all have to make a decision when you're in the system. Do you honor the system or do you honor truth? And at some point there is a crossover. There is a place where I think, at least for me, I'm not going to speak for him, but I'll speak for me. There was a time where I went, I could be just like him. I could just be like all of them. I and I have a lot of charisma. I speak in public schools. I'm a decent speaker. I'm better than all of them. I know I'm not. Sounds really cocky, but I know I'm better than him. I know I'm a better speaker. I know I am. And he couldn't get paid in the school. They would fire him.
Dude, I told you this on the phone, man. Like I started doing high school assemblies last year just as a gift back to the community. In our down season, and I was like, holy cow, dude, this is boot camp, bro. Like I can speak to, I can do keynotes to thousands of people and have the room on fire. But man, exercising that muscle in a high school arena, dude,
that's tough.
That's rough.
So when I was just to finish the thought, I could have been all of the, like I could have done, like that's because you need good speaking skills, you need people skills, all that. I had all that. I didn't want to be that morally bankrupt. Brian said it earlier. It is a moral failure. It's a moral failure because you honor the system and the brand more than you honor truth. And you get to that point where you're going to either you're going to be like them, like Jeannie Mayo, because I worked for her for years, saw that, or you're going to be true to truth. You're going to honor truth, and that's going to come at a cost, and it's coming at a cost for you, and it's coming at a cost for me, and it's coming at a cost for Brian. But it's worth the cost. Brian said it when we're at that, we're able to look at that guy in the eye and not feel like I'm selling myself out. I'm not. Yeah. I'm not mad at him either. I'm not. I went through that. I was kind of bitter at him because he played a huge role in my life. I liked that version of that guy back when he was in his 20s. That really helped me a lot. But that version of him now, of just this company man, it's bullshit. And he knows it's bullshit. He knows it is. And whether he was going to admit that or not, that's up to him.
And I'll just tag on the end of that, being true, leaning into truth in a lot of ways, just being true to who you are and who your real self is and who you know you are. And I think, Michael, you alluded to that quite a bit. And so I want to encourage people. One of the things we want to do is help people in these situations that, it's okay to listen to your gut. It's okay to be true to who you are. Of course, you don't want to do that in isolation. You want to try and surround yourself with trusted friends and mentors and in a good community. But at the end of the day, you get to be you, not something that is not you.
Yeah. And and just kind of to put a bow on some of these things, there are days that I wake up that I would literally give anything to go back to being naive. Do you remember the good old days when it's just like you're experiencing man, it's just like, oh man, we were having fun. You believe the best in everything until there's the moment when you can't unsee things. You can't unhear things. You can't unexperience things. And from that moment forward that nothing will ever be the same again. And, and I think that that's where, and it took a little bit of time, like even as I was going through counseling and whatnot, for me to hear it over and over again of saying, Michael, what you experienced is not normal. What you experienced is not okay. And guess what? There was not going to be, there was a couple Assembly of God pastors that would come up and say, that happened. holy cow, there's a couple, but not many.
Yeah.
Not many. It was people from the outside that were literally saying, dude, we're just being honest with you. 99% of the world would look at what you experienced as being was incredibly abusive, was incredibly indoctrinated, and you were used and taken advantage of, and it's not okay.
Right.
And so, but there is life on the other side of it. And I choose to believe the best. And and here's where the accountability play comes into place, is that there's enough dialogue and there's enough conversations coming out right now today to where there's even as of recent, there's another accusation from somebody that's just one step removed from this leader from a church down in Arkansas, into where we had him into the church, and now there's somebody in his church that's saying that they were groomed and they were sexually abused for the last 20 years, 30 years,
20 years,
something like that.
And
no, he says he didn't do it or whatever. So it is what it is, but there's an investigation going on. But there's only so many times when you can have these accusations come forward, and it's just one step removed from the immediate place that we were in. And there's only so much you can say that you didn't know. There's only so much that you can say that you didn't know.
Bingo.
And so
bingo, 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 bingo.
Like, what have you're leading people, and you're isolating people who don't want to be a part of the thing that you're doing, and you're minimizing and you're marginalizing somebody's opportunities and somebody's potential so you can control them, but yet you're not willing to actually address the real questions.
Right. That's my biggest problem. I understand people are going to make mistakes and make bad choices, but when you as the leader cover it up because whatever, like that person you're talking about, your leader and my mentor, this isn't speculation. I had conversations with him about other leaders that I saw behind closed doors do bad things. He had acknowledged it and then platformed her. Knowing what he knew about her, he still platformed her. And that to me is like when you said you can't unsee or whatever what you saw or unhear what you've heard. That was like a wake up call for me. Like she's bad, she's making bad decisions, and you're still going to put her on the platform because it makes you look good because you don't want to be brave enough to call out sin. Then you just told me that truth doesn't matter to you. What matters to you is the success of the brand, and I can't follow that.
And I don't, at the time, I didn't know much about any of those things. Okay.
Yeah.
But here's what and here's what hurt in the middle of all of it. And this is where I say it's like that talent trafficking thing. And I'm not like making any accusations at this point. It's like, it is what it is. Like, it's like, I wish him nothing but the best. I want him to experience amazing things, and I want him to experience God's grace and goodness. Like, I really want him to experience great things. And I hope that I hope that he comes into a season of maybe answering some of these questions, but I don't wish him ill. Right. I want to be super clear about that. But here's what was hard about being on that team is that, I'm working like 100 hours a week. I am all in. I saw the church go from 300 to multiple thousands of people, like in the time that I was the person building all the system strategies and structures. Like, I am all in. And I saw him choose those relationships. Like, I came here and I told him specifically, I said, hey man, friendship before ministry, it's my number one rule. Like, I need to be on somebody's team who's willing to be my friend. And I got thrown into the fire and I got left alone. And I saw him time and time again choose those relationships that were corrupt versus over actually being responsible and taking care of the people that were right in front of him. And I think that's where the lonely place was,
and that's moral failure. That, be clear, that's moral failure on his part.
Well, and I don't know if it's moral failure or if it's, and that's where I would disagree just a little bit. I think, again, like, when you're in that space of being a lead pastor and your church is blowing up and you're being invited to, like, he was experiencing some things that he'd never experienced before. I think it's operational failure. I think, again, if you are a lead pastor that's yeah, exactly, right? Like if you are a lead guy, you have to remind yourself that your first congregation that you need to pastor is your team that's running with you. That's your first responsibility of leading your team. And
Yeah.
but I haven't, because I haven't chatted with him. I've heard rumors that he's made some alignments and he's made some pretty big strategic changes. And so some of these things might not be relevant today, because again, it's 8 years
I
later.
haven't got a phone call, so until that happens, I'm not going to believe a word. Sorry.
Yeah.
He
But for
called me son.
me,
He called me son. So I get that phone call. He called me son. He said, "You're a son in the Lord." So I should get that phone call. So that's all I'm
yeah,
saying.
I never got that spot.
Yeah, I did.
But um,
I'm
but
sorry.
there is,
I'm getting a little triggered here. I better calm down.
man. But I'm telling you what, like, here's the thing: is that I'm not a person of entitlement. I don't feel like I deserve anything, but I do believe that everybody deserves one thing, and it's this: everybody deserves the opportunity to experience hope. Everybody. And so for me, like, I've experienced that. Like I'm a better version of myself today, and like like I'm a completely different person than I was when I first joined that team. I feel like I found my center, found my true north, and I'm thankful for the type of impact I get to make in the lives of leaders. Now, if you're in those moments in which you're a part of a team, you got to be super careful in those environments that you're in, because unfortunately, the indoctrination and the manipulation plays, they are so normative in that culture. So you just got to be careful. But if you need to get out, if you need to move on to the next thing, man, it's like, feel free to reach out if you want to have that conversation with me about the 5 or 6 different things that are absolutely necessary in order for you to find traction again. It's not going to be perfect. You're still going to make mistakes. I want to be clear about that. Like, you're gonna fall down again, but having the ability to be able to keep on getting back up, keep trying, keep dreaming, it's so important. I actually wrote this keynote called Dreaming Through Failure, and I'm working on a book that's working on that same thing, because the first thing that I lost when going through failure was the ability to dream, and was able to recognize, okay, here are the 5 to 10 things that I went through to make sure that I was able to reignite my dream engine. And that's what I want people to experience. This is not your destination. Like, what happened to you, this does not define you.
Love
The
that.
mistakes that you made, they don't define you. Um, like, you are a child or daughter of God, and your ability to dream and inspire hope in the people around you, run to that.
That's a great place to end it.
Yeah.
I think that's excellent. Yeah. I mean, and that's what happened to me too. Is I in the last couple of years I've been able, and you kind of helped me, Mike. We had conversations about value up, and the things that we're doing now. Have been birthed out of some of the conversations we had. But yeah, it's being able to see that there's life beyond the church. There's life beyond that way of blessing people. I'm not saying that church is bad. I'm saying that, if you're in a system that's corrupt and bad, there is other venues, there's other ways to let your dream and your gifts be, you know, dispensed to the world. My gift is dispensed to the world through Value Up. And
Yeah.
so that's the way I'm doing it. And it's not necessarily church. I can't do church in schools, so I have to find a way to do it another way. So, Brian, why don't you give us the last word here?
All right. Well, Michael, thank you for coming on and being transparent and being upfront, and for sharing a lot of wisdom here. I guess maybe I want to echo what Michael said at the end, sorry, is that there is hope. There's hope.
Yeah,
There is hope, and you can take control. You can retrieve your own agency, and you can pursue that, and you can find it. There's a way out here. And that's one of the things that this podcast is all about. And this has been very positive and uplifting. And I really appreciate you coming on, Michael, and taking your time.
Thanks so much, Michael. We're going to go ahead and post on the description of this. We'll put the links to Mike's, all his information. And if you're a coach out there, if you're executive that needs a coach, Mike's great. I've had him. I've worked with him, so he's a great guy. very understanding, and you'll really appreciate working with him. So, Michael, thank you so much for.
Hey, I got one more thing.
Yeah.
Let me give you this. This is just a gift. This is a gift for you for your SEO. So people will listen to this. You ready for this? I'm just going to give you one statement, and we can leave it with this. Ready? Bad Bunny wasn't horrible at the Super Bowl.
Thank you. I agree.
I'll take that. On board.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. Groomed.Connect.